Deep beneath the surface of a forgotten world, in the ruins of a once proud colony, the air was heavy with the stench of rust and despair. The old slave cells stretched like endless tunnels, carved into stone and metal, their walls echoing with silence broken only by the faint dripping of water. Here, far from the sunlight, there was no freedom, no hope, and no mercy. Inside one of the darkest cells, a dragon woman lay chained. Her once mighty wings were torn and broken, shackled to the wall by iron links that burned with cruel enchantments. Her scales, once bright as fire, were dull now, cracked with wounds and covered in the dust of the dungeon. Her fire, the sacred flame that lived inside every dragon's heart, flickered weakly, fading with each breath. She had been strong once, a warrior, a protector of her kind. But years of captivity had stolen her strength. Now she lay on the cold stone floor, her chest rising and falling slowly, as if each breath was a battle. The heavy chains rattled whenever she moved, a cruel reminder that her life belonged to her captors. In the shadows of the cell, two small figures clung to her side. Her baby dragons, her only children, pressed themselves against their mother's body, their tiny scales shimmering faintly in the darkness. They were too young to understand the cruelty of the world, too young to know why their mother suffered. But they felt her pain, they felt her weakness, and they wept. Their cries were soft, broken sounds that carried through the prison corridors, the kind of cries that pierced the heart. The little ones nudged their mother with their snouts, trying to keep her awake, trying to keep her alive. They licked at her wounds with their tiny tongues, desperate to help, but helpless against the weight of chains and the cruelty of man. The mother dragon wanted to comfort them, but even speaking had become too hard. Her voice was no longer the roar of a dragon queen, but a whisper, fragile and weak. She lowered her head, pressing her snout gently against her children, as if to say, "I am here, I will not leave you." But inside her heart, she knew the truth. She was dying. The slave masters had beaten her, starved her, broken her wings, and drained her fire. She had fought for so long, but even dragons could not fight forever. Her body was failing, and soon, her children would be alone in the dark. The cell was filled with the smell of blood and iron. Every corner of it carried despair, as if the stones themselves had given up hope. The torches outside the cell burned low, casting dim, flickering shadows across the bars. For the baby dragons, the world had always been this way, dark, cold, cruel. They had never seen the sun. They had never flown in the open sky. Their only world was this prison, and their only comfort was their mother. And now that comfort was slipping away. The mother's eyes closed, her breathing shallow. The babies let out a louder cry, shaking their tiny wings in panic. One of them nudged her face again and again, unwilling to accept that she might leave them. Their tears fell, glowing faintly like drops of fire in the dark. The sound carried far in the silence of the dungeon. Any other night it would have been ignored. The guards were cruel men, who enjoyed the suffering of their prisoners. They would have laughed at the cries, or worse, punished the little ones for making noise. But tonight, something was different. From above the dungeon, faint but growing stronger, came a sound that did not belong in this place. The steady hum of machinery. At first, it was distant, hidden beneath the silence. But soon it grew clearer. The clanking of gears, the grinding of old steel, the low rumble of engines waking after a long sleep. The mother's eyes opened slowly. The babies fell silent, their cries cut short, as if they too sensed something strange. Their small ears twitched, their glowing eyes wide, searching the shadows. The sound echoed through the halls like a ghost, unfamiliar yet powerful. It was not the heavy boots of guards, not the cruel laughter of masters, not the scream of another prisoner. No, this was something new, something that did not belong here. The dragon mother's heart beat faster, though her body was weak. Could this be salvation, or was it another form of torment? She tried to rise, her chains clattering against the stone, but her strength failed her. She collapsed back to the ground, her wings folding helplessly. The babies pressed closer, their bodies trembling with fear. The machinery's sound grew louder. Somewhere above, a door slammed. Sparks lit the darkness as if something mechanical had come alive. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the rhythm of engines. The mother dragon closed her eyes, listening. Every instinct inside her screamed that something was coming. Something different. Something important. She wanted to believe it was hope, but she had lived too long in chains to believe in miracles. Still, for the sake of her children, she kept her eyes open. The babies whimpered, crawling beneath her broken wings for safety. Their small bodies shivered, unsure whether to cry or to wait in silence. The dungeon air grew colder as the sound approached, echoing through the corridors. The faint light of torches flickered, disturbed by a draft of air that carried the scent of oil and smoke. The mother dragon's tail twitched weakly. Her claws scraped against the stone floor, a reflex of both fear and readiness. She had nothing left, no fire, no strength. But if danger came, she would still fight. For them. Minutes passed like hours. The sound drew nearer, until it was right outside the dungeon walls. And then silence. The babies lifted their heads, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The mother strained to hear. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. For a moment, it felt as if the whole world had stopped. And then a rattle. The chains that bound her shook suddenly, not by her own struggle, not by the pull of guards. Something had touched them. Something had disturbed the silence. Her heart leapt in fear and hope, tangled together. And the babies froze, their small eyes fixed on the door. The dragon mother's breath caught in her throat. Because this time, the chains rattled, but this time it was not the guards. The dungeon was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the silence of despair, the silence of chains and hopeless dreams. The dragon mother lay against the cold stone floor, her body trembling from exhaustion. Every breath she took was shallow, ragged, as if even the air did not want to stay inside her lungs. The spark of fire in her chest, the flame that once could burn armies, now flickered like a dying candle. Her children huddled close. Two small dragons, their wings barely grown, pressed against her sides as if trying to share their warmth. They were too young to speak, but their cries told the story of their fear. Their glowing eyes searched their mother's face, desperate for a sign that she was strong, that she would rise again. But she could not rise. Her body carried the marks of her suffering. Her scales were cracked where whips had struck her. Her wings bore scars where cruel blades had cut them. The chains around her neck and legs were heavy, forged from steel mixed with strange human magic, so even her strength could not break them. She remembered the battles of the past, when she had soared across skies of fire, her roar shaking the earth. She remembered the freedom of wind beneath her wings, and the pride of carrying her children's eggs in safety. She had once been called protector. Now she was only a prisoner. The babies did not know this past. For them, life had always been darkness. They had never seen the open sky, never felt the warmth of the sun. Their whole world was this dungeon, this cage, these chains. Their first memories were not of flying, but of crying beside their dying mother. The dragon mother's heart broke at the thought. She had fought against her captors not for herself, but for them. She had endured chains, hunger, and pain because she believed one day they might escape. One day they might live free. But that hope was slipping away with every weak beat of her heart. Outside the cell, footsteps echoed. Heavy, careless footsteps. Human guards, laughing among themselves. Their voices were sharp, cruel. "Still alive, that beast?" one said. "Barely," another answered. "She won't last long. Good. Less food to waste." They laughed as they passed by, their torches casting flickering light into the cell. For a moment, the babies hid under their mother's wing, trembling from the sound of men's voices. The mother growled faintly, though it was only a whisper of her once mighty roar. The guards heard it and they laughed louder. "Still thinks she's dangerous," one mocked. "Pathetic creature." Their laughter faded as they walked away, leaving silence again. The dragon mother closed her eyes, the pain of humiliation cutting deeper than the wounds on her body. Once, humans had feared dragons. Once, her roar had made armies tremble. Now they laughed at her suffering. Her children nuzzled against her, confused and frightened. They could not understand the words, but they felt the cruelty. They felt their mother's sorrow. The mother wished she could tell them not to be afraid. She wished she could promise them that things would be better. But her voice was gone, her strength fading. All she could do was rest her head against them, a silent vow that she would not stop fighting until her last breath. The hours passed slowly in the dungeon. Time did not move in a place like this. There was only hunger, pain, and waiting. The babies grew restless, their small bellies empty. They licked at the stone floor, searching for scraps, but found nothing. Their cries grew louder, and the mother's heart ached. She wanted to feed them, to give them strength, but she had nothing left to give. Once, she would have hunted for them, brought them the choicest prey, taught them how to use their fire. But now, all she could do was watch them suffer with her. The weight of despair pressed down on the cell like a heavy stone. The mother's thoughts grew dark. She wondered if death might be kinder than this endless torment. If closing her eyes forever might spare her children from watching her fade away. But when she looked at their small, glowing eyes, she knew she could not give up. They needed her. Even if she had no strength left, she would endure. For them. A memory flickered in her mind. The day they were born. 2 eggs, glowing softly in the dark of her nest. She remembered the moment they cracked open, the first cries of her children, the first time she wrapped her wings around them. In that moment she had felt hope. She had believed the world still held beauty, even in the shadow of chains. She could not let that hope die. But hope was hard to hold in the darkness. Every sound of footsteps outside the cell reminded her of her captors. Every rattle of her chains reminded her of her weakness. And yet, there was something else tonight. The faint sound of machinery she had heard earlier still echoed in her mind. It was strange, unfamiliar. It was not the sound of guards. It was not the sound of cruelty. It was something new. For the first time in many years, she felt a spark of curiosity. Could it mean something? Could it be a sign that fate had not abandoned her? Her children stirred beside her, their cries softening. They seemed calmer now, as if they too felt something strange in the air. They pressed close to her, their warmth reminding her of why she could not surrender. She lifted her head slightly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The dungeon was the same, cold, silent, hopeless. But deep inside her, a question burned. Was there still a chance? The hours stretched on. The guards' footsteps came and went. The babies slept and woke, their cries echoing in the cell. The mother drifted between pain and memory, between despair and faint hope. Her body was failing, but her spirit, fragile as it was, still refused to die. Because even in the darkest place, even in chains, a mother's love was stronger than suffering. And though she could not know it yet, fate was moving above her. The sound of machinery had not been a dream. Something or someone was coming. The dragon mother closed her eyes again, whispering a silent prayer to the fire within her. She did not know if she would live to see freedom. She did not know if her children would survive. But she knew this. If salvation came, she would fight with the last of her strength to seize it. The dungeon was not the end. Not yet. And somewhere in the shadows of the colony, a stranger was already walking the path that would lead to her cell. Far above the dungeon cells, the colony creaked with the weight of age. The machines that once powered its mines were broken, their gears stiff with rust. The humans who ruled this place were careless masters. They did not repair what was failing, they forced others to do it. That was why the mechanic was here. He was not a soldier. He was not a guard. He was just a worker, a man with calloused hands and tired eyes. His clothes were stained with oil, his boots worn from years of walking metal floors. He did not belong to this colony, but he had been dragged here as a prisoner of labor. His skill with machines kept him alive. Tonight, he had been ordered to check the failing engines deep beneath the colony. The guards had shoved him toward the stairways, barking orders he dared not refuse. With a small toolbox in hand, he descended into the dark places few humans ever walked. The deeper he went, the stranger the silence became. The usual noise of chains and moans faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Only the echo of his own footsteps followed him. His lantern swung at his side, throwing weak circles of light against the stone and iron walls. As he walked, he heard something unusual. At first, it was faint, almost too soft to notice. A sound that did not belong to machines or men. Crying. He froze, his ears strained. The sound came again, thin and broken, like the cry of children. His brow furrowed. Children? Here? Impossible. No child could survive in a place like this. The guards had no mercy even for their own kind. And yet, the sound was real. His heart quickened. Against his better judgment, he followed it. The corridor twisted, narrow and damp. His lantern revealed doors of heavy steel, lined with rust, their locks thick and cruel. Behind some of them came faint sounds. Chains clinking, weak groans of prisoners half dead. But it was the cries that pulled him deeper, guiding him to a cell at the far end of the hall. He stopped before the door. The sound was clearer now. Not human cries. Softer, stranger, almost musical in their sadness. He placed a hand on the cold metal, listening. And then, a low sound shook him to his core. A breath, deep and ragged, like the growl of something too large for this place. He stepped back, fear tightening in his chest. His first thought was to turn away. Whatever was inside this cell was not human, not safe. But then he remembered the cries, the children. He hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. His hand moved to the lock, rough with rust and age. Inside the cell, the dragon mother stirred. She had sensed something. Footsteps not like the guards, lighter, uncertain. Her children had felt it too. They had gone silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the door. The mechanic took a breath, lifted his lantern higher, and peered through the small slit in the door. His eyes widened. There, in the darkness, he saw her. A great creature, chained to the wall, her body broken and weak. Her scales, once bright, were cracked and dull. Her wings lay folded, torn and useless. And pressed against her side, two tiny dragons, their eyes shining like fireflies in the night. The sight stole his breath. He had heard tales of dragons, stories told by travelers and soldiers. But he had never seen one. And here she was, not a beast of legend, but a prisoner, dying in chains. His first instinct was fear. Dragons were killers, monsters, destroyers of cities. But as he looked closer, his fear shifted to something else. Pity. The babies whimpered, their small bodies trembling. They pressed against their mother, who turned her head weakly toward him. Her eyes, though dim with pain, locked on his. They were not the eyes of a monster. They were the eyes of a mother. For a long moment, neither moved. The mechanic stood frozen, his lantern trembling in his hand. The dragon mother stared, her chains clinking faintly as she shifted. Then the babies cried again, a sound so filled with sorrow it cut into his heart. He felt something stir inside him. Anger, not at the dragons, but at the cruelty that had brought them to this place. He had seen slaves suffer, seen prisoners beaten, but this was different. These were not warriors or rebels. These were children, and their mother was dying before their eyes. The mechanic stepped closer to the door. His hand touched the lock again. The iron was thick but old. With the right tools he could break it. But his mind raced. If the guards found him here, helping a dragon, they would kill him without hesitation. Helping prisoners was forbidden. Helping her would be suicide. Yet when he looked again at the tiny dragons, their cries soft and desperate, he knew he could not walk away. His hands trembled as he opened his toolbox. He pulled out a small tool, slipping it into the lock. The sound of metal against metal echoed softly. Inside the cell, the babies went quiet, watching him. The mother lifted her head, her eyes fixed on his every move. She did not roar, did not threaten. She simply waited. The lock resisted, old and stubborn. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, every second stretching like an eternity. His lantern light flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. Finally, with a sharp click, the lock shifted. The door creaked, the sound loud in the silence. The mechanic froze, glancing down the corridor. No footsteps, no voices. The guards had not heard. Slowly, carefully, he pushed the door open. The smell hit him first: blood, rust, and the faint scent of fire. His lantern revealed the full sight of the cell. The dragon mother lay in chains, her body trembling. The babies stared at him with glowing eyes, their small claws scraping the floor nervously. He stepped inside. Every instinct told him to run, but something stronger held him there, the silent plea in their eyes. He set the lantern down, its light spilling across the room. He knelt beside the chains, studying them. Heavy iron, cruelly designed. And worse, he could see the shimmer of strange energy carved into them, runes of suppression that kept her fire locked inside. The mother let out a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. It was weak, almost broken, but it was not a threat. It was a call, a plea. The mechanic placed his hand gently on the chain, as if promising her he would try. The babies crept closer, their small wings fluttering nervously. They sniffed at him, their glowing eyes wide, their tiny bodies trembling with both fear and hope. For a long moment, the dungeon was silent, save for the faint hum of his lantern and the soft breaths of dragons and man. Then, with trembling hands, he reached into his toolbox once more. The dragon mother's eyes followed him, glowing faintly in the dim light. She did not know who he was or why he had come, but in her heart, she felt something stir, something she had not felt in years. Hope. The mechanic placed his tool against the first chain. Sparks flew in the dark cell. The babies gasped softly, their cries silenced. And the mother's heart pounded as she realized. The chains rattled again. But this time it was not the guards. The cell was silent except for the faint hiss of sparks. The mechanic's hands worked quickly, though his heart pounded like a hammer in his chest. The iron chains were cruel things, carved with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the light. Whoever forged them had meant not only to bind but to break. The dragon mother flinched with each spark. The energy burned her scales, but she did not pull away. Her eyes, dim but unyielding, stayed fixed on the stranger kneeling before her. The mechanic muttered under his breath, frustration rising. These are no ordinary locks. They're designed to hold you forever. He glanced at her. She blinked slowly, as if she understood. The babies whimpered, their tiny claws scraping the stone floor. They pressed themselves close to their mother, trembling at every noise. Their glowing eyes followed the man's every movement. The mechanic paused, sweat dripping down his temple. He looked at her chest, at the way it rose and fell unevenly. Each breath was a battle, shallow and weak. She didn't have much time left. "Damn it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You're dying." His hands shook as he searched through his toolbox. He knew he couldn't break all the chains in time. Even if he did, she was too weak to stand, too broken to fight. And yet, something stirred inside him. He remembered old tales whispered in the colonies, stories of dragon fire. A dragon's heart was not like a human's. It was a furnace, a living engine of flame. If that flame went out, the dragon died. But if it could be reignited, his eyes flicked to the tools in his hand. Energy. He could channel energy. It was dangerous, could burn her from the inside, but it might also restart her fire. He looked at her again. Her eyes were closing, her head drooping. The babies nudged her, crying louder now, sensing the shadow of death closing in. The mechanic's chest tightened. He had seen death before, but not like this. Not a mother dying in front of her children. Not while those children wept, helpless. He clenched his jaw. "I'll try." His hands moved quickly, pulling wires and a small power cell from his kit. It was old, barely charged, but it might be enough. He stripped the wires, sparks snapping in the air, the faint hum of energy filling the cell. The babies cried louder, frightened by the sound. The mechanic glanced at them, then at their mother. "I'm not here to hurt her," he whispered, though his words were meant as much for himself as for them. He pressed two wires together, a spark flaring. His heart raced. He was about to attempt the impossible, to bring a dragon back from the edge of death. He moved closer to her chest, where her scales glowed faintly with the last flicker of fire. He hesitated, his hand trembling. If he failed, the shock would kill her instantly. But if he did nothing, she would die anyway. He pressed the wires to her chest. A sharp crack filled the air. Sparks leapt, crawling across her scales. The mother dragon arched weakly, her body shuddering as the energy surged through her. Her eyes flew open, glowing faintly for a second before dimming again. The babies shrieked, pressing against her, their wings fluttering in panic. The mechanic pulled the wires back, his heart hammering. "Come on, come on. Don't you give up now." He adjusted the wires, tightening the connection. His hands were slick with sweat, his breath ragged. He pressed them again. Another surge. Her body convulsed, her chains rattling violently against the stone. A weak sound escaped her throat. Not a roar, not even a growl, but a broken gasp that shook the air. The mechanic's eyes widened. She was still alive. Barely. But it wasn't enough. He gritted his teeth, pushing the power cell to its limit. The hum grew louder, the wires glowing red with heat. He pressed them hard against her chest, praying to gods he no longer believed in. "Breathe," he hissed. "Breathe." The energy surged again. Sparks flew across the cell, lighting the walls with eerie flashes. The dragon mother's body jerked, her head slamming against the stone. The babies wailed, their cries echoing through the dungeon. And then silence. The mechanic froze, staring at her still form. Her chest did not rise. Her eyes were closed. "No," he whispered. His stomach turned cold. "No, no, no." The babies crawled onto her, nudging her face, crying desperately. Their tiny wings fluttered, their claws scratching at the chains as if trying to free her. The mechanic's hands shook violently. He couldn't stop now. He wouldn't. He pressed the wires one final time, releasing the last surge of power. It was stronger, wilder, more dangerous. Sparks exploded across the cell, filling the air with smoke and the sharp scent of burning metal. The dragon mother screamed. It was not loud, not the roar of a warrior, but a raw, guttural cry of pain and life. Her body arched, fire flickering inside her throat. For a moment, her chest glowed, her scales lighting with faint embers. Then she fell still again. The mechanic staggered back, panting, his heart pounding. His tools clattered to the floor. The babies went silent, staring at their mother with wide, glowing eyes. The dungeon seemed to hold its breath. The mechanic's chest tightened with fear. Had he done it? Had he reignited the flame? Or had he destroyed her completely? He stepped closer, his hands trembling, staring at her unmoving form. Her chest was still. Her eyes were closed. The babies whimpered once more, pressing themselves against her, waiting for a sign. The mechanic swallowed hard, his voice breaking in a whisper. "Did I save you, or kill you?" And the cell went silent again. The dungeon was still. The only light came from the mechanic's lantern, its glow trembling on the stone walls. Smoke drifted through the air from the last burst of sparks, carrying the acrid scent of burned metal. The mechanic stood frozen, his breath caught in his chest. The dragon mother lay unmoving before him, her wings limp, her head resting against the cold floor. Her children pressed against her, their small bodies trembling. He whispered to himself, voice weak and broken. "She's gone." The words stabbed him. He had tried. He had risked everything. But what if he had only brought more pain? What if his desperate act had finished what the chains had already begun? The babies cried softly, nudging their mother's face, their glowing eyes wide with sorrow. They pressed their snouts to her chest, listening for a heartbeat, begging for a breath. The mechanic turned away, his hands covering his face. The weight of failure crushed him. He had never been a hero, just a man with tools, forced to fix machines for cruel masters. He had no business trying to save a creature of legend. And yet, he could not walk away. His lantern flickered, as if even the light was losing hope. He stared at the dim glow, feeling the cold of the dungeon press against him. Then a sound. Faint, soft, almost too quiet to hear. The mechanic's head snapped toward the dragon mother. Her chest moved. Barely, but it moved. His heart leapt into his throat. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside her. His eyes searched desperately, and there it was again. Her chest rose, a shallow breath escaping her throat. The babies froze, then cried out in joy, their wings fluttering wildly. They nuzzled against her, their small bodies vibrating with excitement. The mechanic let out a shaky laugh of disbelief. "You're alive. You're actually alive." A faint glow spread across the dragon mother's chest. Tiny embers lit beneath her scales, glowing like stars in the dark. Her throat rumbled weakly, the ghost of a growl. Her eyes opened. Not wide, not strong, but open. Two slits of golden fire glared out from her tired face, fixing on the mechanic. He froze under her gaze. Those eyes, though dulled by suffering, still carried the ancient weight of her kind. They burned with both pain and strength, with both fury and gratitude. For a moment, the mechanic thought she might strike him, even in her weakness. But then he saw it, the faintest flicker of trust. The babies chirped happily, climbing onto her weak wings, their cries turning into soft trills of relief. They licked at her face, pressed against her neck, clung to her as though afraid she might vanish again. The mother shifted, her chains rattling. Her body trembled, but fire glowed faintly in her throat, a small flame fighting to live again. The mechanic let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He almost smiled, though his hands still shook. "You're not done yet," he whispered. "Not today." He looked at his nearly drained power cell, the wires still glowing faintly. He had used almost everything he had. He couldn't repeat the process, but he didn't need to. The spark had caught. Her fire had returned. For the first time in years, the dungeon cell felt different. It still reeked of rust and blood, but now there was something else in the air. Not despair. Not silence. Hope. The mechanic's relief lasted only a moment. Then he heard it. Footsteps. He froze, his blood turning cold. The sound was faint at first, then louder, echoing down the corridor outside. The heavy stomp of boots. The muffled clank of weapons. The guards. The mechanic's stomach twisted. The sparks, the noise, the cries. Of course they had heard. He grabbed his lantern, quickly dimming it, pressing himself against the shadows of the wall. His mind raced. If they found him here, with the door unlocked, with the chains sparking, they would know. They would kill him on the spot. The babies sensed it too. Their happy cries turned to fearful whimpers, their eyes darting to the door. They crawled under their mother's weak wings, trying to hide. The dragon mother lifted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing. Her chest rumbled with a weak growl, chains rattling as she stirred. She was not ready to fight, but she would not let her children be taken without resistance. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Voices joined them, harsh and mocking. "Did you hear that noise?" one said. "Yeah. Sparks, maybe. Something broke down here. Or someone's messing around where they shouldn't." The mechanic's hands clenched. He looked at the dragon mother, then at the door. He had to think. If they entered now, they would see everything. They would see her alive, her fire rekindled. And they would kill her. The mother's golden eyes locked onto his, as if she understood. For a moment, man and dragon stared at each other, bound by the same fear. The mechanic swallowed hard, whispering, "Stay quiet. Please, stay quiet." But the chains betrayed them. As the mother shifted, the iron links rattled against the stone, the sound echoing through the dungeon. The footsteps stopped. Then came the harsh voice of a guard. "The beast is awake." The mechanic's blood ran cold. The babies pressed tighter against their mother, their small bodies trembling. The mother bared her teeth weakly, fire glowing faintly in her throat. The mechanic's heart pounded. He reached for his tools, though he knew they would be useless against soldiers. The guards' voices grew louder, their boots striking the ground as they approached the door. "Open it," one ordered. "Let's see what's making all that noise." The mechanic's breath caught. He looked at the dragon mother, at her children, at the chains still binding her. He had no plan, no weapon, no hope of fighting them off. And yet he could not leave. The door shook violently as the guards struck it from outside. The metal groaned, the lock rattling. The mechanic backed against the wall, sweat running down his face, his chest heaving. The dragon mother lifted her head higher, her dim eyes blazing with fragile fire. She would not go down quietly. The babies whimpered, hiding beneath her wings. The dungeon echoed with the sound of fists and boots hammering against the steel. The guards shouted, their voices filled with cruel excitement. And then, the door began to open. The dungeon door creaked open, metal shrieking as the lock gave way. The mechanic's heart pounded in his chest. He pressed himself against the shadows, clutching a wrench like a sword, though he knew it would do little against armored men. The guards entered. Two at first, their torches casting long shadows, their eyes gleaming with cruel delight. Behind them, more voices echoed in the corridor. Reinforcements. "There she is," one sneered, pointing his torch toward the dragon mother. "Still alive after all this time. The masters will be pleased." "Look at those whelps hiding under her wings," the second guard said with a laugh. "Maybe we should take them first." The babies whimpered, pressing against their mother's chest. Their small wings trembled, their eyes wide with terror. The dragon mother's chains rattled as she tried to rise. Her body was weak, trembling, but her eyes blazed with fire. A low growl escaped her throat, a rumble that shook the stones beneath her. The first guard smirked. "You've got no strength left, beast. Stay down." He stepped forward, raising his spear. The mechanic's body moved before his mind could stop him. He leapt from the shadows, slamming his wrench against the guard's arm. The torch clattered to the floor, fire flaring on the damp ground. The guard cursed, swinging his weapon wildly. The mechanic ducked, his breath ragged. He wasn't a fighter, every movement was survival, not skill. The second guard charged, but the dragon mother roared, weak, broken, yet filled with fury. Fire erupted from her throat, a burst of golden flame. It was not strong, but it was enough. The torch fire ignited, surging with her breath, and the guard stumbled back in fear. The mechanic seized the moment, dragging the fallen torch and thrusting it into the chains around her chest. The flames licked at the strange symbols, and to his shock, the iron glowed, cracks spreading across the bindings. The dragon mother strained, pulling with the last of her strength. The metal screamed, then shattered. Her chest heaved, her wings spreading wide for the first time in years. The dungeon shook as she rose, towering even in her weakened state. The guards froze, their faces pale. "She's free," one whispered. The dragon mother roared. This time, the sound was full and thunderous, shaking dust from the ceiling. Fire blazed from her mouth, engulfing the guards. Their screams echoed briefly before the flames consumed them, leaving only silence. The mechanic shielded his face from the heat, his heart racing. When he lowered his arm, he saw her standing tall, fire glowing from every scale, her children nestled beneath her wings. She turned her head toward him. For a moment, man and dragon locked eyes. There was no anger now, no suspicion, only gratitude. The dungeon trembled as more guards rushed toward the noise. The mechanic heard their boots, their shouts, the clash of weapons. Dozens of them. He looked at her and whispered, "We can't stay. You have to fly." Her golden eyes blinked, then narrowed with determination. She gathered her children beneath her wings, her fire flaring bright. With a single beat of her massive wings, she shattered the last of her chains and leapt upward. The ceiling cracked. Stone and dust rained down as she blasted through, carving a hole into the world above. The mechanic staggered, shielding himself from falling debris. Light spilled into the dungeon for the first time in decades. real sunlight, golden and warm. The dragon mother rose into the open sky, her children clinging to her, their cries turning to joyful songs. The mechanic stumbled out through the hole, climbing broken stone until he reached the surface. He emerged into the sunlight just in time to see her soaring across the sky, fire trailing behind her like a comet. For the first time, she was free. He fell to his knees, staring upward, his chest heaving with relief. The guards shouted behind him, but he didn't care. He had seen something no man had seen before. A miracle. Above, the dragon mother circled once. She beat her wings against the clouds, her roar echoing across the sky. The babies clung to her, chirping happily, their small flames flickering like stars. She descended slightly, her golden eyes meeting his once more. And then, with a powerful beat of her wings, she soared away, vanishing into the horizon. The mechanic sat in silence, tears burning his eyes. He had come into the dungeon a broken man, a slave with nothing. But he had walked out having given life back to something greater than himself. Hope. Somewhere in the distance, her roar echoed again. Not of pain, but of freedom. The mechanic smiled faintly. He whispered into the wind, "Take care of them, mother of dragons." The sky blazed with fire as she vanished into the clouds, her children's cries carrying across the heavens. And the dungeon, once a place of despair, was left behind in silence.